When you hear the rhythm, start to move.
Hi everyone, welcome to Shameless Careers, a podcast about finding a career you're passionate about, or at least don't hate. Please subscribe, like, share, do all of these amazing things. They really help me grow my podcasting side gig alongside my full-time job. Today, my guest is JJ. JJ's path is mega exciting. JJ started his career at Google, then went to McKinsey, where he got exposure to digital transformation and deep learning projects. After that, JJ went deeper into AI space, where he joined a large AI consultancy, where he was head of the division and was in charge of AI strategy. Finally, equipped with all this knowledge, JJ decided to plunge into entrepreneurship. He went to Entrepreneur First, where he launched a company delivering real-time biometric feedback for fitness and health applications. And this year, JJ launched another AI company, a co-pilot for private equity, helping automate the job of entire teams to make them superhuman. So, as you can imagine, tons to talk about, what it's like to run AI business, what lessons JJ has learned, and, of course, in the end, how AI can impact our careers going forward. So, JJ, thank you so much for being here with me today.
My pleasure.
Cool. So let's start from the very beginning. When did you get your first exposure to AI, and how did you pick particularly this space out of all possible careers that you could be pursuing?
So the first time I got exposed to AI proper was during my master's at Fudan in Shanghai. I took a class doing advanced analytics for marketing, and a subject that I've hated in the past, which was statistics, suddenly clicked for me. It's not necessarily that I hated the subject proper, but I'm sorry, but I don't think I had very good professors during college for statistics. I felt like I was just rote memorizing. And I had this teacher, and we started using some very basic, like R and Python, some of the basic languages you use to manipulate large data sets. And I said, well, this all feels very human, very intuitive. A lot of the concepts in AI are a lot simpler than people realize. Things like clustering, which means, for example, like putting things that look like each other together. It's a very human concept. And once you understand the concepts, the math makes a lot more sense. It clicks a lot more. In terms of why choosing to double down on it, I just think it's one of these epoch-defining technologies. You've had platform shifts, starting with, well, of course, if you want, you can go back to the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine and electricity. But then perhaps more recently, you had the period of the mainframe, pioneered, of course, by IBM, amongst other companies. We moved on to the to the computer paradigm, mobile paradigm. There is also, the Cambrian explosion of software, which I would argue perhaps started in the 80s. And each one of these big epochs or eras lasted, let's say, 50 years. AI from the beginning felt very much to me like it was going to be one of these era-defining technologies. Also, AI is a very catch-all term, and it's also almost a proxy for so many things that you can do with it, right? Like same as you say software. What is software? Like software can be anything, right? Same with AI. I just knew that this was the future, that this was going to change everything. And I've always known that I wanted to try and have a positive impact in my career. And while I didn't quite know what my what was going to be in terms of like what subject area I wanted to work on, I know what my how was going to be. And the how being, at first it was going to be data, analytics. Eventually it sort of crystallized into artificial intelligence.
Amazing. And I know that you got exposure to this area even more during your McKinsey times in strategy consulting. Can you tell me, how did you think about your path afterwards, after your consulting experience? Did you already know back then that you wanted to eventually become an entrepreneur?
It's funny, I never had ambitions of being an entrepreneur. Some people like dream of being a CEO. I've never had that ambition. I've had other fantasies throughout my life. I've always wanted to conduct Mahler's Second Symphony, but I've never said, I need to be a CEO. Kind of happened organically. At this master's that I talked about, I did a very hands-on data manipulation. Then I did an internship at Google, where I also got to apply a bunch of these things to consumer marketing, some things that were not being done at the time. And I thought, hey, we have all these data sets. Why not apply this to, for example, what promotions we do and how we do and what we talk about? Then at McKinsey, I got to explore this from a more top-down, abstract, almost use case perspective. Cool, this is what the technology does. What can you do with it? For example, in financial services, in retail. So at this point, I felt pretty comfortable with going both bottom-up and top-down. And it happened, at a point I just felt like the learning rate was decreasing a little bit for me at McKinsey. So I knew that I wanted to do something else. I got approached, everyone is at the beginning of their career at McKinsey, for a number of projects. And this one was at a large consultancy where, I'm going to be honest, like at first, I had to sort of fight against my personal pride, almost that wanted to keep seeking brands. And I had to have a sit down with myself and say, okay, if you're really honest with your goals, do you really need another brand? You have some brands in your CV, that's great, tick. If you actually say that you're serious about impact, you need to learn the ropes. You need to actually do this in real life. So I felt like working somewhere where I was going to have to be doing implementation all the time for different use cases was a great way to learn and to actually get my hands dirty. I don't know how I sweet talked myself into becoming the head of the division because I was 25 at that time. And I had like 15 direct reports. Well, I grew it to 15 direct reports and 100 something people in the team. I was reporting into the CEO. And I know that you've asked me why did I decide to go into entrepreneurship, so I don't want to spend too much time on this one moment. But it was great because chronologically, when a large client first came in contact with the firm, they would often talk to me because they would be saying, okay, what's happening in my industry? What are you doing today? What's the gap between where you are and where you want to be? What are the use cases? How do we prioritize them? How do we prepare you to start like delivering against those use cases? Then finally it clicked for me. I said, okay, fine. You say you want to have a positive impact, and I have like galloping ADHD, which I've like managed to control with the years. But it's one of those things where instead of getting overwhelmed with like the amount of things that were being thrown my way, because even at that consultancy I took on other things like people things. For example, I actually wrote the people framework for the firm. I said, okay, cool, instead of all of these things feeling overwhelming, they actually give me energy. So this looks a lot like, the more responsibility I take, the more I enjoy it. So let's consider entrepreneurship. I wanted to do it in a structured manner. I've done most things fairly structured in my career up until that point. So that's why I did it at Entrepreneur first. I felt it was a way to de-risk going into entrepreneurship.
Right. And speaking of actually pausing on entrepreneurship a little bit, can you elaborate it a bit more as to why it felt right for you? So you said you wanted more responsibility. What else? How, like looking back right now, how did it tie to your personal like mission, values, purpose?
Yeah, I think this is why it's great to have a North Star metric of what you want to achieve in life, because then you don't need to, you cannot possibly know every single time the decision you're going to make. But if you have something that you're optimizing for, that helps break down every decision a lot more. So I said, cool, I say I want to have a large positive impact. Let's decompose that. How does that sort of permeate? How does that crystallize into my career today? And I said, look, managing these people is great, but I'm constrained by the speed of the firm, what the firm wants to do, the resources of the firm. I also felt a little, I loved my colleagues, but I felt like I didn't have all the resources necessarily to succeed. It's kind of like, okay, well, now you're really senior, go and execute, go and sell projects, whatever. So I said, okay, well, look, if I'm going to have to be learning anyway and learning by myself, might as well also do it at a place where that learning can compound and can eventually produce not linear growth, but exponential growth. Entrepreneurship felt like a place where my restlessness, instead of being a downside, was a superpower. So that's why I said, I think if I want to have an impact, and this technology this is happening now, right? I'm sure there's going to be things to do in 5 and 10 years, but the change is happening now. Let's go seize that change right now. So that's why I said, okay, well, let's make the jump now. If not now, when? The pandemic was about to hit, but it hadn't hit yet. There had been some news about cases in China and whatnot, but it was not something like really that people were talking about. So I don't know what decision I would have made had the pandemic being in full blown, fully on. Probably actually maybe the same decision, because it was a great time to build. If you're not doing anything else, just put your head down and just build.
And how did you approach the risks of this move? Obviously, like people would tell you, look, it's entrepreneurship is risky. Obviously, you also had an opportunity cost because clearly you were on a career trajectory that was like a very good trajectory. How did you have a doubt whether it was the right decision, and did you have any fears around it?
Not really, actually. But I think this is very important. to talk about a little bit about privilege, in the sense that I knew I was not going to be like, if things went wrong, I was not going to end up, under a bridge, like sleeping outside. There's a lot of adoration and mystification of founders. And what you don't talk about is, okay, fine, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out, but like he dropped out of Harvard, having this like really like sort of stable, well-to-do family or whatever. So it's easy to take risks when you know that the downside is smaller. And that's something that I want to say, like it's important to acknowledge that privilege kind of thing. But yes, it was still a risk, of course. Like I could have derailed my career. And also, if you think of career almost as a scatter plot of decisions you do, right? It's like almost like a cloud points of like, you make this decision and this decision. At the beginning of your career, if you've been going to good schools or have good brands or whatever, that scatter plot is going to roughly point upwards. You don't yet know what the slope of the line, but you know that it's going upwards. So entrepreneurship is the first time where you have almost like, full ownership, and it tends to be fairly black or white, particularly with tech entrepreneurship, let alone consumer entrepreneurship. Either it goes well or it doesn't. This thing of hopping along I don't know if that's true for pure tech entrepreneurship, maybe if you sell projects. But so the problem with that scatter plot is that this is the first time where your next point might be up here or down here, right? It's not going to be roughly within the previous cloud. So of course there's a risk, and of course it was scary. But at the same time I thought, look, it's never going to be the right time. And if anything, yes, of course I could wait until I have more financial stability, but then I might want to have kids. Or then you have the kids and then you say, well, okay, now's the time to do it. But then is that going to be at the expense of your health, your partners, your fitness, or whatever, right? So it's never going to be the right time. If not now, when? So yeah, there was a risk, but the risk was kind of like, look, I've already worked enough that even if this failed, I would probably be fine. Although one small thing that I did learn is I thought, if I were a recruiter, I would prefer someone who's done entrepreneurship. You still have the brand names of the more traditional career in the past, and I would prefer someone who's done entrepreneurship because, you must have learned so much. You have been very hands-on, lots of leadership. So I think I'll be more employable even if I fail. Actually, I think I was wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. This is something that someone told me afterwards, and I thought, shit, this is completely true, which is, if you are another founder, you probably want to hire former founders. I definitely would much rather hire people who have that entrepreneur sort of aspect to them. And a lot of the founders that I talk to are the same, because you get doers, right? Who get they're happy with nothing but results. But if you are a recruiter who's incentivized on you just doing your job and not doing your job and not quitting within 6 months or 1 year, because otherwise they take your bonus back. An entrepreneur sometimes, well, in general, the thinking goes that it might not be the best person to hire, because that person might want to quit, because at the end of the day, what they want to do is have their own business.
They might want to do more than what's required.
More than required. They might be divas. You don't know that before. You try to test for that in interviews, but maybe they just think that they want to do more and more and more. So they might not gel. They might just leave. The biggest, most common risk is that they leave sooner than they thought, because they're frustrated working for someone else. So yeah, that's a small thing, and I don't know if that scares people off, but it is true. Well, if you are scared that you're going to be less employable after entrepreneurship if things fail, which fingers crossed that they won't, you might want to then look for jobs at other startups where other founders will actually understand that. Because I know that I and a lot of my entrepreneur friends prefer to hire former founders.
It's amazing. Also speaks a bit more about the type of, corporate environment where this type of initiative can get excessive and actually a red flag. Actually on paper, to your point, it's amazing to have someone who's proactive, have ownership and stuff. But the issue is that in a corporate environment, you should not necessarily display those features and just sit in your box a little bit. So
yeah, there's no reward for doing too much.
Yeah.
Companies like Google, for example, do have this famous 20% time or 20% projects, which is essentially you're encouraged and expected almost to set 20% of your time aside for projects related to Google somehow. So there are companies who do try to encourage it, but yeah, particularly in certain companies where like the remit of the job is very defined. Why would you want someone? You want someone who's done the one thing, particularly as you get more senior in your career. If you want a head of partnership, head of brand, director for sales, you want someone who's been a sales associate, a manager, a head of, and then eventually, because if you're a head of or a director, you might need to be able to set up an entire sales organization, right? So you start building more and more vertical stacks in terms of your skill set. And founders or former founders are, of course, supposed to be great at a lot of things and hopefully have a spike that sets you aside. But you're supposed to just have a base level which is good enough for a lot of things. And that's, again, great for smaller organizations. And if you're a smaller organization, I definitely recommend you searching that talent pool. But if you're a larger organization, that's not necessarily what you want, right?
Yeah. So interesting. All right, let's go back to your career. You are now an entrepreneur first. Can you tell me, did you already have an idea for your business back then, or were you figuring it out whilst you were in the program?
Yeah, so just to clarify for anyone watching, I think you say, in this point in your career, you're an entrepreneur first, as in like 2020, not now. I'm not a EF right now.
Rewinding back. Yeah, exactly.
No, I know what you meant. So I didn't, although I was already working on an idea with someone who knew me from before, from someone had been introduced to me from my business school. But you go into entrepreneur first a bit agnostic, and that's part of the point. They get, at least when I did it, it was a third catalysts, aka commercial people, a third deeply technical people builders, and a third industry vertical experts, someone who knows everything about launching a satellite, even though you're not maybe an engineer. And the reason for that is, look, it's never been easier to launch a business these days, but it's also never been harder to get it to stand out and scale and survive, let alone thrive, because there's so much competition. There's fewer and fewer extremely obvious spaces that people haven't tackled. Don't get me wrong, there's still so much to build. And, as technologies and the world evolves, more opportunities appear. But it's rare that you just say, oh, we should just have a web page where people can create a profile where you put your profile picture and your personal information and you can add your friends. Facebook already exists. Simple ideas are done. Meaning, the ideation part, where you talk to multiple potential partners, founders, and your skill set starts compounding, is actually really, really important. And that's, let me explain this first before I get to caveats. You might say, okay, well, I like and enjoy AI, and I've done AI in the past. And then you are working with someone who has a PhD in biochemistry or whatever, or a doctor. And you say, well, we should maybe explore doing AI for drug discovery. And you're like, okay, cool. Yes, that's a good combination, but there's a million people doing that. So what else do you want? And they're like, okay, well, LLMs have come out, and so maybe we can have an engine that does literature review automatically and, sort of like parses the internet and then gets this in a structured format and actually then builds all of this into a graph database. Okay, cool. But yeah, there's already a lot of companies doing using graph databases within AI for drug discovery. Okay, cool, fine. So maybe what we can do then is specialize in this, but proactive medicine, where we take this. Anyway, point is that, you're supposed to have these conversations and you little by little enrich your ideas by talking to people who are specialists in their fields. You might not end up working with them, but you download a bit of context and ideation, and then you move on to the next person. Because it's almost like a dating game. You're supposed to work together for a bit, see how you get on, how much progress you make with validation. Validation meaning, go out and talk to 100 potential customers, see if there's a real burning need for this and if you're the right people for it. And the caveat that I wanted to talk about earlier is, I get a lot of people from McKinsey, my business school, LBS, Google, coming to me wanting to talk about this idea they have for a business. And that always scares me a little bit when they come to me idea first, because they're emotionally attached to that idea already. It just clicked for them in their head. And 95% of the times, they haven't done real validation to get to that idea. Yeah, they've talked to some friends. That's how the idea originated. Oh, I've talked to, of course I validated it. I talked to, and you find out they've talked to 5, 6 friends and family. This is very cliche. If you've read, I'm sure a lot of people have read this book, but it's called the mom test. Mm. Yeah. If you ask your mom, for those who haven't, if you ask your mom, would you buy an app, an app that does recipes for your iPad? Your mom's going to say yes, because she's your mom, doesn't want to hurt your feelings, but also because the way you're asking, it's kind of would you ever use it? Yes. I mean, at some point I might open it. It doesn't really uncover whether it's a burning need, right? So real validation, it's talking to a ton of people, not going idea first, not being do you like this? But being kind of okay, what are the issues that you're encountering these days? How do you solve them today? What would the ideal solution look like? Mm-hmm. And only after a lot of those conversations, you crystallize into an idea. So yeah, that's always a danger that I see with a lot of my friends who want to go into entrepreneurship and they go idea first, because I know that I tell them this and they're like, don't care. They're still going to go for the thing they had in their mind. And what you're doing there is you're committing yourself for for the next 3, 4, 5, 7 years to an idea that, are you sure this is the right one? Have you done proper deep research?
And how did you approach it for your business? So you were back then in the program, and my understanding from what you've just said is that you were looking for something where you can combine your area of expertise with someone else's area of expertise to build something where there is not enough competition just yet. Is it fair?
That's fair, yeah. So I was not very ideological about it. I was very open-minded. There has to be some kind of like personal story or resonance, ideally, for, this is something that you've encountered before as a problem. So, I talked to a lot of people and I paired up with someone who I thought was a very good skill set combination. Also, other than being an AI PhD, he was a full stack engineer, which is very handy. You need to be building with a core team. You can't just say, oh, we have this great idea, but then we're going to need people to build it, because that's not sustainable. You have to be building and shipping all the time, like constantly. You can't just be relying on some contractors in Ukraine or India or whatever. You have to be able to do this quick. So in this particular case, I've been in a car crash where I was, about to die, unconscious for a while. My spine was deviated, my skull cracked, my lungs have collapsed 6 times for unrelated reasons, just to add a bit of spice to the whole story. I have IBS, a bunch of other things. So, I've had health issues, and yet I managed to go from all of those health issues to, for example, I ended up competing in CrossFit competitions, or I gym a lot these days, or I used to compete as a kid in martial arts and running and whatever. And when I think of what took me from being in such poor health to being able to do those things, it was partly the fact that I found the right coach, the right community, the right support framework. At this time, my co-founder had his PhD was in distributed computing, distributed networks and edge computing, which I'm not going to go very deep into what that means, but essentially, long story short, the fundamental idea here was, can we replicate that healthy competition, support, and community environment that you would get when you go to a class, but for a world where we were going into the pandemic, so for a world that was going to be remote first, at least for a while, online, to make it more accessible to everyone without having to buy a $3,000-$4,000 Peloton bike, and also for more things than biking. Can we do that? And the way to do that is, can we deliver this AI that assesses you, gives you encouragement and feedback that, for example, by giving you points, will create this sense of fun, healthy competition with people you're taking the class with. Can we replicate that healthy, fun class atmosphere in a remote environment? And in order to do that, we needed all of this advanced AI that at the time was not accessible in local devices. Sure, we could ask people to buy a piece of hardware, but that defeated the point of making it accessible. It had to run on your phone, on your laptop. So the big idea was applying his PhD technology of distributed computing to this particular use case, whereby we would run artificial intelligence, but in a distributed manner, which, without getting into the details, essentially meant that anyone would get access to this real-time AI assessment and encouragement and points and biometrics and all that kind of stuff. So it all crystallized a bit like that. I didn't force it to be this way, but that's how it ended up crystallizing.
And a question to you, if you never had experience with AI in your previous roles and jobs, do you think you could theoretically build a business like this? Or do you think, I'm just trying to understand to what extent it's a myth that all businesses come usually from past experiences. Is this true or not? Like if you go to Entrepreneur First program, should you look only at ideas which are linked to your experience, or can you kind of come up with something completely different and it still could work based on what you've seen within the program?
No, that's a great question. First of all, apologies for the disgusting snooze. This is how I manage my ADHD. Cool. So, okay, these are 2 separate questions almost, which is personal experience, as in like from a sort of personal story point of view, and how much does something mean to you, versus skill set. Mm-hmm. Right. So I do think that the personal story should be there somehow. Look, it doesn't have to be like a perfect alignment. For example, I didn't, and right now I do like an AI co-pilot for private equity. I wasn't a cute 4-year-old like tugging my mom's dress and saying, "Mom, when I grow up, can I work in private equity?" Like, that's not how it happened. Astronaut or private equity. But I do have a huge passion for this business, actually, for other reasons. Hope we can talk about that later. But there has to be some kind of alignment, right? Something that matters to you, because this is going to be hard. Like, entrepreneurship is hard. Like, it's the hardest thing I've ever done by far. But separate to that, in terms of skill set, I love that you asked that question, because AI is actually a lot easier than people think, unless, of course, you're like, in a lab working on stable diffusion models, which are super freaking hard, and you're doing the actual math and whatever. But, it actually is a lot easier. Like, LLMs, your ChatGPTs of the world, it's linear math. It's very easy. It's some matrix multiplication with some like hyperparameters to add some spiciness to it and little else, just done at a large scale. But part of what I love about AI is that it's very human. It really, really clicks. Let me first answer your question, which is yes, I think you can go into this, but you probably want to like obviously be deeply immersed and read up and understand what's possible. You don't need to understand all of the math. Thankfully, there's more and more tooling around AI these days, so you don't have to completely, but you do have to understand the concepts. I think that there are like mainly 3 types of AI businesses you can build these days. You can build the foundational technologies, sort of the big models, foundational models that the OpenAI or Anthropics of the world can do. But also, of course, there's like more either smaller, more specialized models. Then there's the toolkit kind of companies, which is kind of like, okay, someone want to take those models, for example, and fine tune them, make them more appropriate for a use case, or okay, you have these models, but I don't yet know which one is the right one to use for my application. So I'm going to create an evaluation tool that allows me to evaluate the output from models. So that's 2 for now, right? Foundational models, AI kind of thing, pure hardcore AI. Selling, what's the expression? Selling axe picks, like selling shovels, like so selling the tooling to work with AI. And the final one is the consumption layer. Okay, now you have AI that exists. What are you going to use it for? Right? Our businesses, it's an oversimplification. We have a lot of technology that is proprietary that we built ourselves, but let's assume that we only use things that other people have built in terms of AI. A lot of that, you can build tons of businesses that can make money quickly. And I don't care. In the past, people would always ask, what if Google builds it? Look, Google is not going to build a private equity co-pilot anytime soon, right? And also, by that mentality, no one would build anything. Mm-hmm. There's so many things where like you can take some of the existing tooling in AI and build tomorrow with it. You can even ask the AI to build the front end for you. Literally, the latest models, GPT-01, which is the latest model they released, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, or Claude 3.5 Sonnet. You can literally go to their website and even with the free tier, say, build me an app that does this. And then you can even use other models to like tests and like see where the errors are happening, if there's any. So you can build without being super, super deep into this. I do think the concepts and understanding the concepts are important, but again, they're very human, very easy to understand. For example, you get a model that generates output, let's say a summary of a document. These deep techniques, sort of these papers that are super sexy coming from sexy labs, at the end of the day, they're so intuitive. It's like, okay, well, you can generate a model that creates an output. Then you can have an adversarial pair, which is a fancy way of saying just another model checking that output. I mean, that is intuitive, and that increases accuracy by a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance here, but essentially you can have a model and then you can have a model do the meta orchestration, another technique. Instead of having a model do everything and say, create, in our case, for example, a red flag report about a company, which is essentially a report where before you look deeper into a company, you might want to see, is there any red flags that I want to look into, legal red flags, human red flags, operational. A model by itself is not going to be able to solve that. But this technique called meta orchestration, essentially what it does is you ask a big model, a powerful model, okay, how would you break down this task? Break it down into subtasks. So it breaks down those tasks. And then either the model itself or you manually can assign sub-models, even maybe specialized or fine-tune models to each of the subtasks to execute. Okay, so you're saying that you want to do a red flag report, where you're going to have a model that is exclusively going to parse the internet to look for the profiles of these people and extract the relevant information from their LinkedIns or whatever. Then you're going to have another model evaluate how does this experience match against what this company is supposed to do? Do they have the right experience? So what I'm trying to explain here is that this is all very human. You don't have to be an AI PhD to understand how this works. You have a model generating or a model planning, another model executing, then maybe another set of model challenging the output of the first model. I'm going to stop there. There's many other techniques I would like to talk about, but yeah.
So basically, if you want to start a business like this and you don't have like a massive experience with this field, kind of you need to obviously familiarize yourselves with what the technology does and what the applications are, but probably the most important thing is to find the business use case, is to understand what you're going to apply it to and where like it's going to be unique, differentiated, and like will make money essentially.
Yes, I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. Obvious as it is, finding something that is narrow enough and where people are willing to pay tomorrow is the single most important thing you can do to set yourself up for success. Yes, of course, there are businesses that start very abstract and then just kind of like hope to solve human intelligence, and they'll try to find monetization later on. Look, unless you are one of the founding team, one of the people who wrote the "Attention is all you need" original paper at Google that sparked this whole revolution, you're probably not going to get enough funding to just like spend the next couple of years just like pinch your nose, hold your breath, and just work and develop some super sexy technology and then worry about selling it later. That's probably not going to happen. The era also of just raising money, let alone any kind of important money more than friends and family, just based on an idea and good intentions, is over. Make money first and then worry about other things later. So what this means practically is find a use case, no matter how freaking narrow, this is a cliche in Silicon Valley, but I was I had some humility beaten into me by having not done this at first, which is you have to find a niche so niche that you're almost embarrassed to talk about the business, because it's so niche and small that it's almost like, why would you work on that? You can always expand from it, but you need to make money. If it's niche enough that you're solving a very real, very specific problem for people, the best proof that a business needs to be built here is that they're willing to pay you tomorrow. Not in 3 months, not a maybe, not a, oh, this is cool and interesting, let's talk about it again in the future. No, pay me tomorrow. But when you fundraise, it's a cliche to say, very few investors are going to tell you no. They'll tell you, oh, that's really cool. Let's talk again when you're a bit later in your stage, in your journey. That's because they're not incentivized to say no. Because A, they don't want you to dislike them and also talk poorly about them. Also because they want to keep their options open. Look, if you are making millions in revenue in a couple of months, yeah, of course I want to talk to you. But what that means is a lot of people are deceived by the same kind of like feedback, not just from investors, but from friends, family, people in your network who will rarely tell you this is a dumb idea, right? Because often, it's probably not a dumb idea. It's just not an idea that is urgent enough, right? So you want to start with something very narrow where people are willing to pay tomorrow. And if people are not willing to pay tomorrow, then thank you so much for the conversation, but this is not the right thing.
Right. And narrow, because if you go broad, it will likely already has been explored by someone else, right?
For a number of reasons. One is because the time from ideation to monetization is going to be longer because you need to build more to get there. Also because it's likely that there's someone better funded and capitalized to do this than you. Also because it's harder to really pin down what the problem is. There's many things. If you say I'm going to do, AI for, again, drug discovery, where do you begin? There's so many moving parts. What's the part that actually needs more talent and investment and work right now, right? You need to start narrow. Your company might just do data labeling for a specific type of protein, for a specific whatever, or in financial terms, in terms of what we do. Our product started very unsexy, doing one thing that was very unsexy, which is just chat with your documents, be able to ask, what's the EBITDA 2026 for this company, right? And then, search through thousands of documents, Excels, whatever. But getting that one thing right was really freaking hard. Particularly with AI, another important thing is it's easy and very fast to go from 0 to 80% good. But going from 80 to 95, 97, it's so hard.
So that people trust this technology, right, in terms of the output.
Yeah, that's why if you look at the SP500, something like 97, if not 100% of the SP500 will have some kind of pilot or demo with generative AI. But how many people are using this every day in production? Because if I ask what is EBITDA 2026 for this company, it's black or white. Are you retrieving the right answer, yes or no? And the right answer is often not just, is there a number that at some point was correct? No. Is it the most recent number? Is the most recent number also from a document that was not a draft document, but actually the final version of that document? Everything else being equal, if you don't know the dates or the dates are the same or whatever, does it weigh more if it comes from a PowerPoint presentation or from a legal document? PowerPoint presentation might have been an answer that you gave earlier on as you were planning. For example, maybe you're doing planning around this company, so you say, we expect EBITDA to be this much. While the contract that you sign is like legally binding, it's kind of like something that came at the end of a deal, for example, right? Just to state a very simple example. So the difference between right and wrong, the more that you understand the use case, becomes more and more nuanced. And that's why you want to start narrow. And again, you can always expand from there.
So cool. And anything else that you have learned around kind of what works and what doesn't work in that space? For example, would you go B2B or B2C? Like based, again, on all the, and we're speaking specifically about AI-focused businesses, what in your experience has worked and what hasn't, and what have you observed among other people who are building similar types of businesses?
You should definitely go B2C if you're a glutton for suffering. You should go B2C if you wake up every morning thinking, how could I make my day worse? Then go B2C.
Amazing pitch.
Is that
Exciting
clear?
proposition.
Yeah, it's an exciting proposition. The reason for that is B2C is black or white. Either it works or it doesn't. You know, think of the apps on your phone. You're used to, you open the app and it loads in a millisecond and the app looks beautiful and it takes you directly to the exact thing that you wanted from that app. If you open Instagram, it's going to be not just like, it's first of all, the first thing you see is the pictures and then, or videos or whatever, and it's going to be the most relevant one to you, right? If you open Amazon, is the first thing at the top, search bar, you're ready to go, go be a shopping rock star. It's so hard to get a consumer business right because, again, either you find product market fit or you don't. Hobbling along is something you can only do for so long. And the good news is once you find product market fit, you're going to see this hockey stick kind of curve. But it's going to take a while. B2B is a lot more, can be linear in the sense that, first of all, if your product really solves a pain point, your product can look fairly broken and even look fairly ugly, that if it solves the pain point, the customer is probably going to be happy to put up with it. In fact, it doesn't even have to look ugly because it can just be an API, like something that doesn't even have an interface to interact with, right? Both a consumer product and a business product are going to need some kind of backend, but only the consumer product needs a front end that looks dashing, perfect, beautiful. A lot of nuance to what I just said. B2B, particularly when it's prosumer, meaning for professionals, but almost at a scale that is really consumer. Think Figma, Asana, all of these sort of SaaS tools, which is going to be professionals using it, but it's going to be like thousands, millions, whatever. So it's almost consumer. They do need to be beautiful. And even pure B2B enterprise, like it needs to, like with our clients, for example, they love the product. It works better than anything they've tried, but also they talk about how beautiful it is. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and it's a human making a decision, and you don't want to make your day worse. But it is true that the threshold is higher with consumer. First company I launched was B2B2C. We targeted independent professionals who had their own existing customer base. The idea being you can pull an open table. Open table, these days you can use it to make reservations, right? For restaurants and whatnot. But in order to do that, you have to have supply and demand. You have the customers making the reservations and the seats, the tables, right? To eat. It's a marketplace or a two-sided business is one of the hardest things you can do because the moment that you get supply in there and they're not getting demand, they're not getting business, they churn. Same thing with demand. You come here and there's nothing to book, nothing to whatever, you churn. So you have to keep it constantly at a parity, right? And grow them roughly at the same time. And it also means you're building a business for both.
Yeah.
You need a front end and a way to interact with the product for both sides, which is going to be different. So the idea was, okay, cool. So what OpenTable did, just to start with that, the classic example is they went to restaurants and said, do you want a tool to manage your reservations better? They were not promising business. They were not promising new customers. They were just promising, they started as a SaaS tool. Where you say, okay, cool, you need to manage your tables, your reservations. Here's the toolkit for you to do that. So that means the business was going to be happy to say yes and pay for it, period, with what they had today at that point. Then you bring the demand side even better. So the thinking was in our side, let's target professionals and give them a tool whereby they can take bookings, payments, they can deliver classes online, give them a bunch of like things to build packages and integrate with their website, and also the AI component, which differentiated them from their peers, which for them was important as well, right? Like introduce this real-time assessments, healthy competition, whatever. Problem is this market is very fragmented. Think of how many large fitness businesses you know. Even Peloton, which is probably the largest in this space, I'm not counting Nike, for example, which is more like clothes. Even that, Peloton is only a couple billion, which is tiny by the standards of other industries. Very fragmented, partly because a lot of independent professionals, they don't want to be a business. They want to work. They enjoy being, for example, we work with sports physiotherapists, so there was a health component, PTs, coaches. They enjoy the coaching. They don't enjoy being a business. They don't want to scale, or they want to scale, but then they don't put the effort into it. So eventually they did want us to bring them demand as well, right? And that was really hard because you have to build a product for both, and then the brand needs to be impeccable because people really care about the fitness brand they associate themselves with. They take pride on being more of a CrossFit vibe or a High Rocks or whatever it's called, or Peloton or whatever. You need to produce content. Content is so expensive. At our peak, we were spending something like 40-something K pounds, so that's something like $60K per month on content. Another maybe 60K per month in brand and design. It's bloody expensive. So content, brands, front end for both sides of the business. But even if it's just consumer, again, it has to be impeccable. It needs to be on the App Store and just load. And onboarding needs to give you both enough information from the user, but also be short enough that you don't churn people at every stage of the onboarding. Mm-hmm. So if it's your first business, I'd highly encourage that you try a B2B angle, because B2B is not just from a product perspective that it can be easier. It's also from a sales perspective. If you lock in one contract, you've locked in one contract. That money's there. And then you can always sell a second and a third and a fourth. And eventually, of course, you want to automate as much as you can and, gain scale. But it's a lot easier to scale than if you do consumer. Consumer, you launch your app. Either that blows up or it doesn't.
Can you tell me at which point as you were running your first business, you realized that, okay, it's time to pause and launch a new initiative? Why did you decide to do it? And what are you doing differently within your business now?
So the short answer is my co-founder got sick. We were working really hard for a few years. And he got to a point where I think he just couldn't keep working at the pace we were working. And it was such a tech-intensive business with so much context, layers of tech on top of each other. It was so complex to run from a tech point of view that it was really hard to carry on without him. We made the decision to try and sell the business. Fingers crossed. There's a couple of processes right now where we're hopefully selling the IP. So that would be good. And then we closed up chapters. That's the short answer. The longer answer is also that it's just really freaking difficult to do a business that has, AI and brand and content and basic infrastructure that it needs to run. And we raised quite a good pre-seed, $1.7 million, which for pre-seed is quite good. Also, we did that like months after forming as a business. But even though it seems good, actually it's nowhere near enough for a business of those characteristics. I've already talked about, how much money we spend. We spend like something like $60K just on content every month, $60K on brand every month. We try to be very ad hoc with our spend. We wouldn't just like have a team of 16 data scientists on permanent payroll. No, we did it ad hoc. We said, okay, now we need to solve this algorithm, this whatever. You hire them, you stand down the business, that team, right? They were contractors. So we still were fairly savvy with how we managed our money, and we built so much and gained so many customers and so much traction with relatively little money. But this coincided, my co-founder not being as available, with a crunch in funding. If people remember the crash when interest rates were raised and, Russia, the geopolitical events and everything, funding environment completely dried up. So it was at a point where, okay, we need to decide whether we keep working on this. I knew we couldn't do this without proper funding. I would have still gone on a bit, but, if now you need a new co-founder and need to raise money and something has to give. So unfortunately, it was almost imposed, that decision. I don't regret it because I do think that first of all, the company still exists, and if we sell the IP, great. But if not, I still actually think that has a lot of potential. That company might go back with my money that I'm making from the new from the new business and revive that one. But it was almost organic. At one point, I need to figure out what to do with my life. People in my network heard that I was available, so they approached me to do some first AI strategy, talk about what should they be doing in their funds with AI. Often it crystallized with make sense, use your current data better, understand it better, be able to query it, be able to use it better, gain a competitive advantage from all this super valuable, expensive documents that you have and they're just sitting there, all this unstructured information, which is just like waiting to be tapped. And then you can build automations on top of it. So, there was a lot of promise there. I can also tell you if it's okay with like why this space, essentially.
Yeah, of course.
So the simple answer is, like I said, I got approached to do it. But the better answer is also, private equity is great in that they have so much money.
So can you tell me what the idea of your second business was and how it came about?
So the second business is a private equity co-pilot, meaning we use artificial intelligence, but not just artificial intelligence, a bunch of tech, to be able to get answers, almost any answer you need for your deal making, so purely asking questions, automate entire parts of your workflow, like for example, generating entire research pieces, not just specific questions, but entire research pieces about companies that in either your portfolio or that you're looking into. And then also some ancillary things, like for example, fact check that the information you're getting is correct, etc. The idea was also, if you do this for private equity, you're not just serving private equity funds, you're also serving their portfolio companies. And that was super exciting to me because the possibilities are endless. A lot of AI, or the new wave of this tech, works horizontally across many domains. So for example, if you have a strong pipeline that allows you to absorb, as we have, PDFs, PowerPoints, Excels, emails, Word documents, and you get that pipeline to a point where it's extremely accurate, which ours is, sure, you can serve the fund itself, but we already organically get asked by the funds when they're, when they trust us, they're super happy with the technology. Can we use this for our pharma services company, for our marketing company, for our whatever? So we knew that by working with private equity, you unlock the work not just with private equity, but also the funds. Private equity owned companies employ something like 11 million people just in the US. So the opportunities for impact are huge. And it's an industry that is fairly low regulation compared to others. I want to cure cancer, but right now, like with these technologies that are not yet proven, but there's a lot of things moving, I don't want to kill a patient. So this is a technology where like it's fairly easy to experiment at a small scale before you scale up to a large scale. They have tons of data that is just sitting there. Low bureaucracy, because funds, even the very largest funds with tens of billions of assets under management, are fairly shallow in terms of their staffing. They don't have those many people in the teams, and they're ready to roll. It's like they need results. I love that because it goes very well with my own ethos and my own like ADHD. I want results tomorrow, not in 6 months. I don't want to do an exploratory piece to like weigh things, but like the 0.1% better. This initiative we should prioritize, and the other one we should plan for 2 years from now. No, let's deliver results tomorrow, and then we worry about the next results and then the next results.
Yeah, and can you tell me, so what do you feel you are doing differently right now versus the previous business, so that kind of you capitalize on the learnings from the previous work that you have done?
Man, so many things. So first of all, prioritize revenue. Cold as that might sound, nothing says there is a burning need for this and people are willing to give you money. We don't build in a vacuum anymore. Sure, we can put a little demo POC together in a few hours and we'll do that because it clicks always better to see the thing working than having to imagine a concept. But right now, we actually say this to one of our clients who love us. They said themselves, we hold back from giving you even more work because we know that you're capacity constrained right now. And we said, well, yeah, because we talk about all these ideas, but like, as long as we don't put them into practice, we're not making money from this. So, we need to be very savvy with how we use our resources. So they're like, okay, cool. Well, then we just give you some upfront money for this. Okay, cool. Now I'm happy to build this out further for you, right? Or customize it for you.
Because you have confirmed with the customer that, okay, they're paying for it tomorrow and the use case is super clear, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because, particularly with AI, there's so many cool ideas that you can do.
Anything else that...
Yeah. So that was one. Another one is stay narrow. You're going to be pulled many places, and it's almost more important what you say no to than what you say yes to. Money, people paying for it is one component, but it's not the only component. It's all, as you're narrow, become really freaking good at the one thing, and then you can always expand from there, and then expand and expand. So say no to a lot more things. A lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, when you first go into entrepreneurship, you think, oh, well, maybe the solution, the answer to this thing not quite clicking yet, not quite like exploding in revenue or demand, is that I just need to build a little more and a little more and a little more. And that's a very easy way to get lost with just work that doesn't pay off, right? And you're doing busy work that makes you feel like you're making progress, but are you making progress? I'm a lot more chill also with how I manage the team. So with the previous business, so much pressure on ourselves, right? Like I said, we tried to do so much with relatively little money that I just felt like I had to go in constant military mode. I also realized that I might be slightly neurodivergent. I mean, I'm definitely ADHD, but maybe also a sprinkle of autism in there. So I would have very black or white thinking, very like hyper fixated, while now I'm a lot more chill about these things. I still want results, but I'm a lot, for example, more at ease with making peace with, you know, who is good at what. My co-founder, I think, is happy for me to talk about this because we've talked about this a million times. For example, he has an incredible energy and like positivity, optimism. He's a doer, he executes, but he can lack a bit of attention to detail. In my previous business, I would have just been, whenever, if something didn't work well because of lack of attention to detail, I would have been so frustrated. Well, now I'm a lot more pragmatic, making peace with, look, this is the trade-off I've made, and I'm at peace with that trade-off. You still want to solve issues when they come up, but I don't want to be super frustrated. Hiring, I would be a lot slower hiring now. Hiring, it needs to be incredible caliber people who also are not divas. I've hired divas in the past. I've hired people who were very eager, but they were not superstars. And I've also hired great people, right? But what I'm saying is I have a much better sense now for whom to hire. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. I'm sure there's a million other things, but yeah.
And last question, given how closely you monitor this technology and where it's going, what implications do you think it has on careers? And if you were to give advice to people who are thinking about career change, what do they need to know about AI's implications on future career paths? I guess what jobs to avoid?
So a cool thing about new technologies is that incumbents tend to make it into a feature. And what I mean by that is technologies that seem revolutionary, like in yours, it's suddenly going to become a button on your Gmail to autocomplete a sentence, right? Or on your PowerPoint to just like make a slide prettier. And what I mean by that is the world is going to change a bit slower than we think it does. You know, the hype was everyone is going to be jobless. No, we're going to have jobs, but these jobs are going to be augmented. So if you want to prepare for it, definitely learn what the technology is capable of. If you're not using AI, use it tomorrow. Start already using LLMs. Start asking difficult questions, not just questions to answer something, but even to do something for you. Create this for me. Start learning what it's capable of doing, because it's going to make you so much better at your job. And if it ever so happens that your job does get automated away, you're going to be close enough with the technology. It's just like losing that respect for the technology that you have to do. Take that first step to see what it's capable of.
Amazing. And sorry, I said it was a final question, but I need to ask you the final one. What advice would you give to people who are thinking about jumping into entrepreneurship based on all the learnings and experiences that you've had?
Don't quit your job first. Explore, validate the shit out of an idea. A, because it's going to help you choose the right thing to focus on. But B, it's going to make it more defensible. Even when you talk to investors or whatever, the difference between, oh, I have this great idea and they have a good like history in my CV to, no, I've actually talked to 200 people, out of which I have 20 letters of intent, out of which I already have pre-commitment for 2 POCs, is so much stronger. That gives you that indication. Be ready not to take everything personally. There's going to be way more defeats than there's going to be victories at the beginning. So whenever there's a defeat, shrug it off. It's like, yep, entrepreneurship, whatever, I did this. Don't tie your identity to entrepreneurship, because it will be hard at the beginning. And optimize for something that you're obviously passionate about, but also being pragmatic with what is a business that you can actually build and make it self-sustainable, almost, if not profitable, at least generating revenue within the first like couple of months. And then you can always have a vision to do something much sexier on top of that, right? But like, you know, make sure that, you know, the era of I just have an idea, give me money, that's over. So be pragmatic.
Cool. Thank you so much, JJ. Amazing. I really look forward to following your path going forward.
Thank you.
Let's go.